Hello and welcome to this slideshow on the agricultural revolution and how it contributed to the industrial revolution in Britain. This is what we're going to talk about today. This flowchart that shows how new agricultural techniques and technologies responding to problems in medieval agriculture created the conditions for the industrial revolution. We're going to start by having a look at some of the ways that the Industrial Revolution changed the landscape of Europe. Here, for example, are the major cities in 1800, before the Industrial Revolution has really kicked off. Here they are again in 1937. Here's the European railroads in 1820. And here they are again in the 1940s. Here's an imagined picture of London at the end of the Middle Ages. And here it is again in the modern period. Here's Paris in 1740 and in the modern period. The city of Chicago in the United States in 1820. And in 1880, just 60 years later. Massive changes to the landscape of these areas. We're going to start by looking at the agricultural and textile economy in Europe. Some things to note from this map. Look at how diverse the different sorts of agriculture are. There are areas for dairy and pasture, areas for other cultivation. Notice that there are different areas across the continent for the manufacturing of textiles. But notice also the connection between cities and textile areas. So we need to start by understanding how these new agricultural techniques and technologies were a response to what was going on at the end of the Middle Ages. You might have talked through some of these ideas in your course last year. The end of the Middle Ages was good for agriculture. The climate was getting warmer, better conditions for crops. Feudalism created politically stable conditions. And the raids by those peoples on the periphery, the Arabs, the Vikings and so on, had begun to let up. In Europe, they start to use crop rotation, planting legumes, peas and beans, instead of just always planting grain crops in order to improve and maintain soil fertility. They also leave some land unfarmed in what's called the three-field system, where they'll have a spring crop, an autumn crop, and then some land left fallow. They also develop new technologies like the heavy plough, which cuts in straight lines, furrows, but requires large draft animals, leading to crossbreeding to develop horses that can work longer and harder. That has the effect of opening up larger areas around towns to be used for food production, and population growth and the opening up of new lands for agricultural production. Though there were some problems. Take, for example, the heavy plough. What's the issue with plough teams? Well, you have to plant and plough your fields in a very particular way. They need to be thin strips, something like this, so that everyone can plough some land. Here's what it might have looked like. If you're ploughing common land in these thin strips, how willing do you think you would be to change your agricultural technique? Probably not very. Everyone would have to agree on any new technology that was going to be introduced. What's that going to mean for agricultural production? Well, it's going to be stagnant. So they're going to have to find some other way to respond to the need to feed the population. The three-field system, again, under this system, what is most land used for? For growing the food, for growing the legumes and the grain to feed the people. What's that going to mean for their ability of the peasants to raise livestock? Well, there's not going to be very much land available for running livestock for pasture. Flow-on effect of this is, are you going to have any fertilizer for your soil to keep your crops producing at their best? Well, no, because the major fertilizer in this period is manure. So again, agricultural production is going to be stagnant. So we need to find a better system. What happens in the Middle Ages is the rise of towns. Towns are the homes of which class? The class that has what? Merchants and a middle class, those with money, who are looking for some opportunity to invest and grow their wealth. One way that they can do that is to invest in new technologies, inventions, and inventors. This is one a really important invention from 1731, the seed drill, which allowed seeds to be planted in rows. It aerated the soil. It didn't require any particularly new technology. It was made of wood and metal, but it could rapidly change the way a farm worked and improve its production. So we have a new agricultural system start to come onto the scene. One of the innovations is what's called the four-field system. Under this system, you divide your land into 4 areas, and over the course of the year, you'll grow turnips, barley, wheat, and clover. This will have several advantages. One is that you'll just get more food. Ratios go from something like 1:5 to 1:10. This is the result of one of the advantages of crop rotation, which is that it keeps nitrogen in the soil and keeps the land fertile. It also has the advantage of opening up more land. You don't just have to use the prime land, you can also use the less fertile land. It has another advantage that you don't need to keep any land fallow. All land is being used for some productive purpose. You're using 100% of your land, which greatly expands the potential for food production. So peasants working this land are going to get more money, and what are they going to spend it on? They're going to buy food and livestock. They're going to start looking at selective breeding in order to maximize their investment in livestock, which is going to lead to selection for weight, condition, size, and so on. Like this happy-looking sheep. Peasants are going to have access to more meat and milk and protein in their diet, which is going to make them happier and healthier. But this new sort of agriculture, using crop rotation and putting selectively bred livestock onto that pasture in the quarter of the year when the land is under pasturage, is going to require a different sort of land arrangement. It needs large areas. And so what do? They enclose that previously common strip farmed land and turn it over to the four-field system, where they can try out some of these new technologies. By 1813, 2.5 million acres are enclosed by a common agreement. 5.5 million acres enclosed by Acts of Parliament. At first, this wasn't such a problem, and people weren't too concerned, because the major problem at the time, in the 1700s, was not having enough food, which is mainly solved by the increased food production that this new agricultural system brought about. But it wasn't so good for the peasants. They've lost their land, they've lost their way of making a living, so what are they going to do? Well, most leave the countryside and move to the cities, looking for new jobs in the factories that are just getting started. Another result is that with all this food available, famines become much less common, which means a lot more children grow to adulthood, increasing the overall population as much as 2 times. Why is this super important to our study of the Industrial Revolution? Because this increased population and this increasingly urbanised population provides the labour supply for Britain's factories and textile mills.